I am Brianna, one of the student representatives of Caribbean Visionary Educators. And today I will be chatting with a very special guest, Mr. Charles, an individual who has worked extensively with the youths of the region as a former regional director. Thanks a lot for taking the time to participate in this interview, Mr. Charles.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. I think it's an honor that you all have asked me to participate in such an important intervention. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm very excited for this conversation. So, firstly, can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Okay, well, like you said, been involved in the whole question of youth and youth development, policy development for a significant amount of time. And in development work for now almost 40 or maybe more years, from my involvement in the early youth movement in St. Lucia, regionally. And then, of course, I serve as, you said, the regional director of the Commonwealth Youth Program Regional Center, responsible for assisting, providing technical guidance to governments throughout the Commonwealth Caribbean. And then I spent some time in London as the director of the Youth Affairs Division. And well, then, providing guidance, leadership, technical support to governments throughout the Commonwealth on youth development. Since the completion of my tour of duty, I have been just based back in the Caribbean, working with governments, agencies like the Caribbean Development Bank, some of the UN agencies and others, helping them shape and reshape youth policy, youth development strategy, issues of youth mainstreaming, right throughout the Caribbean, as I said. And of course, I also make my contribution in the learning environment at UE, where I do part-time lecturing in both the Masters in Child and Youth Studies, as well as this semester I am teaching a course in the geographies of equality and social justice. And all of these, well, the courses and the involvement, they've all brought me, really up kind of front and center with some of the issues and the challenges facing young people and the opportunities, whether it's young men or young women. And then, yeah.
Wow, 40 plus years working with the youths. That is really amazing. So definitely you have lots of experience and knowledge to assist our youth. And also, you said that you went to London and St. Lucia. That is really nice.
Yeah.
So my first question here, why would you say it's important to encourage young women to become involved in science?
Well, in my own humble opinion, there is, like I recognize, has been said by many development players, globally, regionally, a disparity in terms of the women's role, especially young women as well, in science. And I have seen recommendations, proposals, which to my mind are really seeking to address the consequence and not the real problem. In my own mind, that disparity, the current disparity that we're seeing in terms of women's involvement in science or the underrepresentation is really a consequence of a bigger problem. And that bigger problem, to my mind, is what I refer to as structural inequalities in our economic, political, and social development space. It is also, also a factor, I think, of the imbalance that exists within the power structures of the society. And when I say the power structures, I'm not just referring to parties and politics, but power structures in terms of which groups are dominant and which groups have access to power and which groups do not have access to power. In our society, power is power is defined and treated as an elite something, and that power belongs to an elite. So whether the elite is a men or a patriarchal system, or whether the elite is an economic, those with economic power and that kind of thing. So I believe it is part of that inequality, structural inequality in our society that is contributing to this. In that we, I think, have a patriarchal society, and what it has done is to designate certain roles and functions for women, right? And many of those roles and functions are supposedly in the caring functions, right? So that even as we are witnessing and discussing the fact that you have a underrepresentation of women in STEM, the irony is they account for 70% of the nursing profession. Now, the nursing profession, of course, has some relation to science. But what it does is, so there's this underrepresented of women in science or STEM, engineering, all those generally, but there's a 70% rep thing of them in nursing. And the reason is because nursing is more seen, is seen less as a science sphere than it is seen as a caring profession. Also, I note that according to UNESCO, a recent study, they confirm that there is a prevalence in gender bias in STEM. In fact, they're saying that only 28% of women account for engineering graduates in the world. 40% of the graduates in computer science are women, and 33% of all researchers in science are women. So there's nowhere where there is, say a 50-50, or women are the largest group, so to speak, in science in the world based on the UNESCO research. Now, that is happening. That kind of disparity in women's participation in science is happening despite the fact that the research, the evidence will show that there is a global shortage of skills in most of the technological fields that is actually driving what is now referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. Countries are dependent more and more on advances in technology, in science, and all those areas. And in order for many countries to keep up pace with some of those developments, to be able to match what the evolutions and developments and the achievements that are taking place, there is in fact a shortage of skills globally. But yet, women, by virtue of certain structural inequalities and structural challenges, are not facilitated in terms of their participations. Okay, so that therefore poses, I think that kind of scenario poses or provides us with some what I think are the compelling reasons why women must be encouraged, but encouragement is not sufficient. They must be encouraged, they must be facilitated, and they must be empowered to be better represented in science. And why? First, and very simple to my mind, it is their right to participate in and practice in every profession that exists, and to prevent and also to prevent industry, whether it's the science industry, the technological industry, from perpetuating the existing gender bias that you have in the labor markets and inequity, right? As the importance of science is in resolving our many development challenges become even more significant, we cannot continue to diminish the impact and the relevance of the solutions because of gender bias. For example, something like artificial intelligence, which impacts our societal, impacts our society, as we use artificial intelligence to address priorities and that kind of thing. The underrepresentation of women's contribution to research and development means that their own needs and their perspective as a gender group, okay, are likely to be overlooked in the design of products that impact our daily lives. Things like medical applications, products like smartphone applications, and even in areas like food security. So on one simple area like artificial intelligence, which is now assuming such significant role in helping achieve our development goals, if women are not encouraged to participate in that sphere of science, then you're going to have the products, the services, the protocols, the ethics, and all those things that are coming out of those things will not be taken into consideration the views of a significant group in the society. A couple of quick points again. Also, just the fact that if you leave women out, we are depriving ourselves of some of the finest intellect that you have to contribute to our scientific development, right? And I think, like as has been recognized by many people, to leave women out or not to adequately get them involved in scientific development or in STEM, as we call it, diminishes our capacity as a human civilization to accomplish sustainable development goals. Okay, and of course to increase our productivity as society. These are some of the compelling reasons why I think, you know, it is overdue. It must be a matter of development priority for, especially for us in the Caribbean, to ensure, and not just ensure to talk like, you know, we usually talk a lot at policy level, but to create policy to dismantle certain structures that you have to ensure women have a greater role to play in advancing our scientific accomplishments.
Everything that you just said, it really puts things in perspective. And as a young female that wants to pursue science, it really was the encouragement. It really wasn't there as much. Like I had to encourage, I had to really push myself to put myself where I am today. I really had to do it on my own. I had the support of my family, but everybody else around, it really is true what you said.
Yeah, yeah.
So, in your opinion, what can we do to increase the participation of women in science?
Well, there is a lot, and I like to put them in maybe two categories. There are some of the micro things I think that can be done. You know, at the education level, but I think in order for us to address that issue, we need to look at it at a broader level. So, for instance, the UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Natural Science says, and I agree with her, it is not enough to attract women to a scientific or technological discipline. Okay, we must also know how to retain them, ensuring that their careers are not strewn with obstacles and that the achievements are recognized and supported by the international scientific community. And I think the point that Nair Beduel, the Assistant Director General of the UNESCO, is saying, now that the focus is on, yes, women must be involved, we may run the risk of making certain incremental changes. Yes, let me go. Yeah, man, advertise the job and say, we're going to take only women for now to kind of create a equilibrium in the number of women that in those jobs. That may assist in bringing more women into scientific realm or scientific jobs or technological related jobs or just STEM generally. But is that sufficient to create a level playing field, or to remove the obstacles, the structural challenges that exist, right? I believe we need to emphasize the fact that scientific interventions are imperative for us to positively transform our regional development landscape, right? Okay, and of course, I think many people will point to the fact that there are availability of opportunities in the learning environment. So you are saying that you want to be doing science, so that yes, there was not encouragement, but there is an opportunity you could register in doing a course of science at the university of the West Indies or any other university to do science. I know, for instance, also that in youth policies, in many of the youth policies that are developed, there is not a specific intervention saying, hey, you must encourage more young women in science. But in terms of promoting gender mainstreaming and rights-based approaches to development, I think what they are seeking to do, many of those interventions, are seeking to create more a more level playing field, or what I would call a greater equilibrium, so that young people are allowed to participate in any sphere of development, irrespective of their race, gender, and that thing. For instance, one of the things that we have been doing in developing policy is in defining youth. Traditionally, we define youth as just an age group. Okay, in those policies, and for deliberate reasons, we have been making the point that in defining youth for development purposes, it is not sufficient to say that it is a particular age group or transition from here to there. But you need to understand that young people are different genders and all of those things. And so in trying to create interventions to promote empowerment and that kind of thing, you need to be able to look at both the singular needs of, say, young women, young men, but also the intersectional needs that they may have: economic needs, political needs education. And so that kind of, now governments, they are slow to come to the table, but part of what that is intending to do is to break down what I say, that even if you say, okay, we're increasing the number of opportunities for young women to be in science at secondary school or at university or whatever, we will only see incremental improvements. But the real problem is still there. The gains that you would make over a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years can be easily pushed back. Okay, so that is that. In my view, what is really needed is for there to be a dismantling, a dismantling of the of what is the lack of balance in the power structures in our society. That dominance of a patriarchal society is what has resulted in diminishing the importance of women in supposedly non-traditional roles. So even if we increase the number of spaces in university, wherever, that disequilibrium, that lack of balance, that in the power structures must be dismantled. And I think that sometimes we underplay that. Even if we say, look, we now have opportunity for 100 young people to do science in the secondary schools of Trinidad and Tobago, let's increase it to 2,000. Even if we say those things, the inequalities, what I call the structural inequalities that have brought about that problem of lack of women in supposedly non-traditional roles, as they refer to it, has pervaded political systems and processes. It has pervaded our economic system. It has pervaded our educational institutions. So if our educational institutions are not in the self trying to create that balance, to break down the inequality, then even though they have more science places, they will not naturally result in young women or women going there, because the imbalance will be there. And it will be perpetuating the patriarchy that has prevented women from becoming seriously involved in science, even though, like I say, 70% of the nursing profession are women, but only because nursing is more defined as a caring profession than it is a scientific profession.
Mr. Charles, you have given us some excellent information, and you brought up some points that would really make someone think about everything that we discussed today. That point with the nursing, it never came to my recognition that could be like that was like one of the inequality that you were speaking about. That is a really, really excellent point and something that I will think about a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any advice, any encouraging words to give to the females of the region that want to pursue sciences?
Well, I'd say go for it. Go for it. I mean, don't allow what I call artificial barriers from preventing you. I think it requires a revolutionary mindset, revolutionary in the sense that you continue to have to challenge the supposed wisdom of parents and wisdom of partners and the wisdom of the society. But it is necessary, not just to ensure that there is equilibrium, that there is equity in the science profession, but for the whole society, the very society. Let me give you an example. I was fortunate to be involved in a reclassification exercise. Now, the reclassification exercise is where a government or an agency looks at the jobs, the job positions, and they decide, okay, after a number of years, let us value those job positions and let us see if we need to upgrade them by way of the compensation, or let us see one job relative to another job, whether we should decrease the pay and all that kind of thing. And when I saw the proposal that a consultant had prepared for the government of St. Lucia at the time, I mean, at one look at it, and I identified what was very instructive in that proposal: the job positions in the public service that were traditionally held by women. You could see that there was an assumption that because women held those positions, that immediately there was a devaluation of them relative to other positions. And that included positions in technology, in engineering, science positions, right? So there is that inbuilt thing. So I think it is one, women, young women, there are those who just want to put their head down and do their work. Go for it. Do not let the defining roles that society has established tell you where to go or pigeonhole you in something. One. Secondly, I think there need to be a greater solidarity among women, both vertical and a horizontal solidarity, whether it's at the grassroots, working class level, those in the middle class, those who are in profession, academia, wherever. There need to be a solidarity, okay, to focus, even while you try to ameliorate some of the consequences, but to focus on what is critical. It is the structural inequalities in our system that is really putting women or the female gender at a disadvantage. Therefore, they need to focus, use, whether it's through academia, whether it's research and writing, whether those who are involved in activism in the community and the society. It needs to be also educating parents, so parents do not continue perpetuating, sometimes very subconsciously they do it, perpetuating those structural inequalities in our society. And that is what is contributing. And not just lack of women in science. It is also a major contributing factor to the prevalence of gender-based violence, which is now really have the whole of Trinidad in uproar.
Mr. Charles, those words of advice meant a lot. It was encouraging, especially coming from a male. And and due to your extensive experience with the youth as well. I would like to thank you a lot for taking the time to come to this interview and chat with me. We thank you here at the CVE, and I hope that our viewers learned a lot and have a lot to think about after this.